when a little boy hovered near his desk, refusing to let the back of his legs touch the chair. A watchful school janitor almost dismissed it as just another quirk of a restless child. But then he noticed a slight tremble in those legs. A small detail, almost invisible, yet enough to shift everything. It hinted at something deeper. Secret bruises, perhaps, hidden beneath oversized clothes. Before we dive into this tense and emotional story of a quiet janitor who saw what others overlooked, a story of broken systems and silent cries, let us know where you are watching from and if you believe that one adult's quiet determination can turn fear into safety. Please like this video and subscribe for more stories that prove how empathy, even in small doses, can change a life forever. Mr. Wallace had spent 14 years working at Highland Oaks Elementary, a modest school on the edge of a quiet suburban district where lawns were neat and staff smiled often. He was the kind of janitor people forgot as soon as they passed him in the hallway. Teachers would nod, sometimes calling him "sir," if they bothered to say anything at all. Children rushed past him, too caught up in giggles or bathroom trips to notice the man with the mop and bucket. Mr. Wallace did not mind. He preferred it that way. Anonymity gave him freedom to observe without the pressure of small talk. He once joked to himself, if the school was a stage, then he was the backstage crew. Essential to every scene, yet never stepping into the spotlight. Each day, he arrived before dawn. He unlocked doors, checked the boiler, flipped on the corridor lights. He made sure the halls glowed gently by the time teachers began to trickle in. Over the years, he had learned to predict the small chaos of school life. A broken faucet in the art room, a jammed locker near the cafeteria, a burned-out light bulb in the science lab. He prided himself on being thorough. He knew exactly where every replacement fixture was kept, which door needed oil, and which floor tiles scuffed the quickest when kids dragged their chairs. He also knew which teachers came early to prepare, and which students wandered the halls before the bell, perhaps because it felt safer to be near an adult who did not ask them to read aloud or solve equations. He kept quiet notes in his head about the kids who seemed a little too quiet, a little too lost. No one ever noticed how closely he paid attention, but he did not care for praise. His job, officially, was to maintain the building, but privately he followed a personal code. Be watchful, be present, and if a child truly needs help, do something. He had stepped in before, in small, quiet ways. Finding a lost jacket for a child too shy to ask. Leaving tissues near a desk where tears often came. Alerting the right teacher when he overheard something troubling. Tiny acts. Invisible to others, but to him they were everything. In 14 years, he had seen many things. Children were complex, unpredictable little humans. Some were loud, some painfully shy. Some acted out when they were hungry. Others withdrew when they were hurting. But never, not once, had he seen what he was seeing now. Mr. Wallace had worked with children for over a decade. He had seen tantrums and giggles, shyness and defiance, but he had never encountered anyone quite like Owen Miller. From the very first day, Owen stood out, not because he wanted attention, but because he avoided it with an intensity that felt almost painful. He never sat, not in the cafeteria, not on the storytime rug, not even at his own desk. He moved along the walls like a shadow, his small figure hugging the edges of every room, as though he wished he could disappear into the paint. To anyone else, it might have seemed like typical fidgety behavior. But Mr. Wallace, he had learned how to listen with his eyes. And what he saw in Owen was not restlessness. It was fear. Silent, constant, unspoken. Owen was no more than 8, maybe 9. Tiny for his age, with wild, dark hair that fell across his face. He wore clothing that never seemed to fit quite right. Too big in the shoulders. Too short at the ankles. They hung on him like borrowed armor, as if he was always bracing for battle. His arms were always crossed, not in stubbornness but protection, guarding his chest, shielding something unseen. And then there were his eyes. Mr. Wallace would never forget them. Haunted. As if he expected punishment for merely existing. A look that said, "Do not notice me, but also help me." At lunchtime, Owen never sat. He would lean against a wall or press himself behind a lunch table, always standing, always watching. And when asked, gently, kindly, to take a seat, he would whisper a response that chilled Mr. Wallace to the bone. "If I sit too long, I get in trouble." It made no sense. Teachers encouraged movement, sure. But punishment for sitting? That was not a school rule. That was something else. Something that lived outside of these walls. Mr. Wallace felt a quiet alarm flicker in his chest. But he knew better than to rush in. Fearful children vanished fast when pushed. So he waited. He watched. At recess, Owen stood near the chain-link fence, arms wrapped around himself like a coat in winter. He barely played. Whenever an adult walked near, he flinched, just slightly, like someone who had been conditioned to brace before impact. In the classroom, during story time, he never joined the circle. He would stand off to the side, rocking back and forth, as though sitting would cost him something he could not afford to lose. One day, Mr. Wallace overheard something that stayed with him. Ms. Downing, Owen's teacher, whispered to her aide, "He's been flagged. Oppositional defiance, probably. He won't follow basic directions. He refuses to sit. We just have to document everything." Document everything. Two words that pierced Mr. Wallace deeper than they should have. Because he knew what documentation often meant. A growing file. A stack of notes. Misbehavior misread. Pain mislabeled. And the child? Forgotten in the margins. One Monday morning, just a few weeks into the semester, Mr. Wallace was mopping outside room 6. The hallway was littered with chalk dust and bits of dried applesauce from the morning chaos. His yellow caution sign was out. His head was down. Until he saw it. Owen. Frozen at his cubby. Backpack slipping off one shoulder. Legs trembling, visibly. No one else noticed. The other kids swirled around him, laughing, grabbing pencils and chatting. But Owen stood completely still, like a statue cracking under pressure. Mr. Wallace felt it in his gut that something was deeply wrong. He quietly pushed his mop aside and walked over, crouching just a bit to meet the boy's level. He spoke softly, so gently it was barely a whisper. "Figured. You all right?" Owen's eyes flicked up, then down again. He looked like he might cry. "Bolt." And then he murmured, barely audible, as if the words themselves hurt. "If I sit too long, the bruises come back." In that moment, time seemed to stop. Mr. Wallace did not speak. He simply nodded, once, letting the boy know. "I hear you. I believe you." Because sometimes, it takes only one adult. Not to fix everything, but to see what no one else does. To become a quiet shield against a world that punishes the innocent in silence. And that day, Mr. Wallace stopped being just the janitor. He became something far more powerful. A witness. A protector. A voice for a child no one listened to. If this story moved you, share it. Because somewhere out there, another Owen is waiting. And another Mr. Wallace might be closer than we think. If I sit all day, it means I'm lazy. Lazy kids get the stool. Owen's voice trembled like a cracked violin string. His head was still bowed, his knees pressed tightly to the cold bathroom floor. The fluorescent light buzzed above them, casting a pale glow that made the bloodstains on his shirt stand out like raw truth. Mr. Wallace froze. He had cleaned every inch of this school 1,000 times over. But in that moment, everything around him felt unfamiliar, hostile, like a place where a child's pain had been silently tolerated for far too long. His voice came out low and steady, though his chest was pounding. Who says that to you?" The boy did not answer. He just shook his head. Not in defiance, but in quiet terror. His tiny frame shuddered like he was bracing for punishment that never came. Mr. Wallace reached forward, slowly, so the boy could see his hands, no sudden movements. He gently touched Owen's arm. "You're not lazy. Do you hear me? You're not lazy. And no one deserves this." Owen flinched slightly, but did not pull away. A small sign of trust. That night, Mr. Wallace sat at his kitchen table long after the clock struck midnight. His spiral notebook lay open before him, filled with tight handwriting and worry. He wrote everything. The trembling legs. The whispered warnings. The blood. The word, stool. A chilling phrase that echoed like a punishment handed down from someone who saw control as discipline and pain as a lesson. He thought of Kurt Miller, a former football coach. No criminal record. A man with authority in his voice and a handshake that probably impressed social workers. But Mr. Wallace had learned something over the years. Not all monsters leave fingerprints. Some leave silence. And bruises. The next morning, he approached the school nurse again. "Has anyone done a full-body wellness check on Owen?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, her face already tight with frustration. "We tried." The guardian declined it. Claims Owen bruises easily and makes things up. Mr. Wallace clenched his jaw. "Kids don't make up bloodstains." The nurse sighed, lowering her voice. "Between you and me, we flagged it." The report went up. But the case was dismissed before it could gain traction. Kurt Miller's file came back clean. As if that erased a child's silent cry for help. Mr. Wallace nodded and walked away. But his mind was already moving, fast and sharp. He had no legal power, no badge. But he had something else. He had eyes. He had a record. And above all, he had a promise to himself. "If I ever sense a child truly needs help, I will not look away." 2 days later, Mr. Wallace began a subtle but deliberate routine. He made sure to be near room 6 during drop-offs. He timed his cleaning near the cafeteria when Owen hovered alone. He watched for body language, flinches, patterns. And most of all, he listened, not just to Owen, but to what was not being said in meetings, in files, in the silences adults too often leave around children like Owen. What he uncovered in the weeks that followed was more than enough. More bruises, more fear, more whispered rules about stools, punishments, and earning meals. Mr. Wallace gathered it all. He built a timeline. He logged every detail. And then, with steady hands, he passed it to someone who could no longer ignore it. A counselor with a conscience, a principal who had once been a teacher, a nurse who had seen too much to stay silent. The storm came fast after that. Kurt Miller was removed from the foster roster within 48 hours. Owen was pulled from the home. Placed, this time, with a woman whose first act was to sit beside him and simply say, "You do not have to earn kindness here." Months later, Mr. Wallace spotted Owen in the schoolyard. He was sitting, actually sitting, legs folded, arms loose, a book in his lap. Reading. No fear. No trembling. Just a child, finally safe enough to rest. Mr. Wallace did not interrupt. He just stood by the window and watched for a moment. Then he turned away, heart heavy with relief. Because sometimes being a janitor is not just about brooms and buckets. Sometimes, it is about being the only adult who sees the thing no one wants to see. The only one who listens when the world is deaf. One quiet man. One broken boy. One choice to care. And that made all the difference. "Stool." Wallace's voice caught in his throat. He crouched lower, gently, eyes level with the trembling boy. "Oh, what do you mean?" Owen hesitated, lips trembling, eyes glassy with fear and shame. "At home," he whispered, voice barely audible. "There's a wooden stool. If I move too much, it leaves marks." The pause. "He hit me because I didn't stand straight." The words came out jagged, like broken glass being forced through a soft throat. Wallace felt his stomach twist with a violent, helpless rage. He clenched his jaw so hard it ached. But his voice remained calm, steady, for Owen. "You did not deserve that. he said softly. With careful hands, Wallace helped the boy to his feet, mindful not to touch the bruised areas. Owen flinched anyway but allowed the help. "Let's get you cleaned up," Wallace murmured, guiding him gently to the sink. "I'm going to tell someone, okay? We can't stay silent." At that, panic surged across Owen's face like a wildfire. "No," he gasped. "If he finds out, he'll make me do the corner all night. Or worse." Wallace froze. The way Owen said, "the corner," made it sound like a prison sentence. He moved his hand close to the boy's shoulder, not touching, just offering presence. "He doesn't get to hurt you anymore, Owen. Not if I can help it." The boy stared at him, wide-eyed. Hope flickered there, and just as quickly vanished. That afternoon, Wallace sat in the janitor's closet, his makeshift office, drafting what he knew would be the most important report of his life. He wrote every detail. Owen's words, the bloodstains, the stool. He added a photo, taken discreetly with shaking hands, of the boy's shirt, the dried streaks of blood along the spine. He hated himself for taking it, but he knew the system spoke in evidence, not emotion. He handed everything to the vice principal, Miss Carver. She read the report with furrowed brows. She promised to forward it to the district child welfare liaison immediately. Wallace left her office with a strange mix of anxiety and hope. Maybe now someone would finally listen. 2 days passed. Nothing changed. On the third, Miss Carver pulled him aside in the hallway. Her expression was tight, rehearsed. "The home visit didn't find any visible injuries," she said flatly. "Owen said he fell while playing outside. The guardian cooperated fully. No further action recommended." Wallace's blood went cold. But the photo? The shirt? The boy's own words? She shook her head. The stain was deemed old. They said it looked like dried ketchup. Wallace laughed bitterly. Ketchup? That shirt smelled like iron and pain. "So we're just going to take the guardian's word for it?" Again. Miss Carver's silence was his answer. The system had chosen convenience over truth. That night, in his small apartment lit by a single desk lamp, Wallace spread out his notebook like a detective at war with a ghost. Every note, every word Owen had said, every instance where someone looked away. He thought of the nurse's earlier report, also ignored. He thought of the dismissals, the loopholes, the bureaucratic blindfolds. He was not a teacher, not a counselor, not a mandated reporter, but he was a witness. And that was something. He made a decision. If no one else would see the truth, he would make them. The next morning, he put his plan into action. Near the school's main entrance, tucked behind mops and detergent in a supply closet, was a narrow window with a view of the curbside pickup zone, the exact place where Owen was dropped off each day. Wallace knew it was risky, maybe even a violation. But when the system fails a child, the rules that protect the system become irrelevant. He installed a discreet motion-activated camera, a cheap model he once used in his garage to catch raccoons. He angled it to face the street sign, pickup/drop-off only. Not for surveillance, for justice. He did not know what the footage would show. But he knew this. Sometimes monsters smile for the system. And sometimes it takes a janitor with a mop and a camera to show what the world refuses to see. Because silence may protect adults, but it destroys children. He did not tell anyone, not even the nurse. Some truths, Mr. Wallace believed, needed more than whispers. They needed undeniable proof. Day after day, he combed through the camera's footage each evening, sitting alone in his apartment with the soft hum of the fridge and the distant sound of children playing in the courtyard. He watched Owen's fragile figure step out of the same car each morning, his spine straight as a ruler, his face tight like a mask stitched with silence. The boy never looked back. He barely spoke. He moved like he had been trained not to breathe too loudly. The man who dropped him off was always the same. Tall, broad-shouldered. Sir Kurt Miller, a former high school football coach turned foster guardian, a man with no criminal record but eyes that scanned the world like it was something to conquer. For almost a week, the camera caught nothing, just fleeting moments. Silent drop-offs. No overt violence. Only Owen's stiffness and the weight he seemed to carry in his tiny frame. Then, on the 7th morning, everything changed. Timestamp, 7:11 a.m. The sun had barely pierced the horizon. The sky was painted in soft orange streaks when Kurt's car pulled up beside the school curb. The passenger door opened. Owen stepped out, slowly, carefully, like every joint in his body ached. He adjusted his backpack, glanced toward the building, and took a step. Suddenly, Kurt lunged. The camera caught the blur of motion, the man yanking the backpack with such force that Owen's head snapped backward. Then came the slap. Deliberate. To the back of the head. Owen staggered. Wallace paused the video there, breath caught in his chest. The angle was partial, the audio silent, but the aggression was unmistakable. The boy's posture sagged, his legs weak. Kurt shoved the backpack into Owen's chest with a snarl and pointed toward the school. Owen's face turned toward the lens for just a second. His eyes looked haunted, like he had already lived 100 battles before this morning. It lasted only a few seconds, but Mr. Wallace knew this was no isolated act. This was a cycle, a silent war being fought every day by a child who had no voice. He saved the footage, not just once, but twice. One copy on a USB drive, another hidden in cloud storage under a name no one would suspect. This time, he would not walk it to the principal's office. He had already seen how that ended: shrugs, paperwork, and excuses. He needed someone outside the system. He needed Diana. That evening, Wallace drove across county lines, through heavy rain and foggy roads, to his sister's house. Diana was not a police officer, but she was something better, a juvenile court advocate known for turning whispers into investigations. She had a reputation for burning through red tape like wildfire. He told her everything, from Owen's whispers in the bathroom, to the bruise, the stool, the camera, the slap. Diana listened in stunned silence, her knuckles white as she held the USB. Her eyes shimmered, not with shock, but fury. "They won't bury this," she said through gritted teeth. "I'll make damn sure of that." But what neither of them realized was how deep the roots ran. Within days, Diana's trusted contact in child protection uncovered a dark pattern. Kurt's brother-in-law was working in the regional intake office. He had been the one flagging past complaints as unsubstantiated. He had been closing reports, silencing the truth. 3 other children had passed through Kurt's home in the last 5 years. Each one labeled as defiant or manipulative. Each one removed quietly and shuffled to other homes, their pain folded into files, buried under bureaucracy. It was not a coincidence. It was a machine. When Mr. Wallace heard, he sat frozen in his chair. The mop handle he used every day to clean messes now felt like a meaningless prop against a system built to fail children. He had suspected abuse. But this was institutional neglect. A fortress built to protect the abuser. But now, the walls were cracking. Because this time, there was video. Undeniable. Unignorable. Diana's team submitted it with an emergency motion and launched a formal inquiry. The pressure mounted, quietly, quickly, and powerfully. And within 72 hours, action arrived. A new caseworker, independent, vetted, unconnected, was assigned. The investigation reopened. Kurt's file, once locked away, was pried open. And Owen was finally heard. Closing scene. Mr. Wallace stood near the school's side gate a week later, watching from a distance as a calm woman in a beige coat gently took Owen's hand and walked him to a waiting car. Owen turned. For the first time in weeks, he looked up at Wallace and offered the faintest nod. A flicker of gratitude, of safety, of freedom. Wallace's throat tightened. He had not saved the world. but he had saved a world. And sometimes, for a child like Owen, that is enough to change everything. A new caseworker was assigned, this time paired with a uniformed officer. There would be no shortcuts, no polite dismissals. Not this time. They knocked on Kurt Miller's door just after sunrise. Kurt opened it with his usual scowl, but his confidence wavered when the officer asked him to step aside. Inside, Owen stood near the hallway, barefoot, his eyes wide and his shoulders drawn tight like coiled springs. As they approached, the boy's lips quivered, not in fear this time, but disbelief. He was being taken away. The officer gently placed a hand on his shoulder. The caseworker knelt beside him, whispering words he had never heard from an adult in authority before. "You're not going back. You're safe now." Owen clutched his backpack and nodded, though his hands trembled as he climbed into the back seat of the car. His eyes darted to the window, almost expecting Kurt to chase after him. But Kurt just stood there on the porch, defeated, silent, exposed. The next morning, whispers rippled through Highland Oaks Elementary like a wind brushing through leaves. Mr. Wallace overheard them in hushed corners. They pulled Owen out. Police were involved. Finally. But relief was short-lived. The foster system, already stretched thin, had nowhere to place Owen. His file was flagged, defiant, manipulative, high behavioral risk. A brand slapped onto kids like him, forged not from truth, but from trauma. No home, no bed, no welcome. The system had failed him again. Mr. Wallace sat in the quiet of the janitor's break room that afternoon, staring at the clock, hearing the echo of Owen's voice in his head. "If I move too much, it leaves marks." Something shifted inside him. A pull. A question. Could he do it? He was a single man. Lived in a one-bedroom apartment with second-hand furniture and a cat named Marbles. He swept floors and fixed leaky sinks. He had never parented anyone, not even a goldfish. But he remembered that moment in the boy's eyes, that first spark of trust in the school bathroom. And suddenly, all his doubts felt small. He picked up the phone. The caseworker was surprised by his offer. Not many janitors or single men with modest apartments volunteered to foster a child labeled difficult. But Mr. Wallace spoke with quiet conviction. "I do not have much," he said, "but I will keep him safe." Emergency approval meant background checks, interviews, home inspections, all within days. He reached out to the school nurse, who offered her full support. A teacher friend vouched for his character. He cleared out his living room, bought a used bed frame off a local listing, and found superhero bed sheets on clearance. His home, once designed for solitude, was slowly turning into something more. A haven. He battled doubts every hour. Could he handle the trauma? The nightmares? The walls Owen would build? But then he would close his eyes and see that bloodied shirt. The bruises. And that was enough to steady him. For days later, just as the streetlights flickered on, a plain sedan pulled up in front of his building. Mr. Wallace stood on the stoop, hands wiping nervously on his jeans. The car door opened. Owen stepped out, shoulders tense, backpack clutched tightly in both hands. His clothes were clean, but his expression was a storm of confusion, fear, and cautious hope. The caseworker gave Mr. Wallace a small nod, staying back to give them space. Owen approached the steps slowly. His eyes searched the windows, the porch, the door, as if expecting a trap. Mr. Wallace knelt slightly, trying to meet him at eye level. No big speeches. No promises he could not keep. Just presence. Stillness. Welcome. As they reached the doorway, Owen hesitated. He looked up, voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure I can stay? I don't want to get in trouble if I sit." Mr. Wallace felt his throat tighten. He opened the door wide, gestured gently to the couch, where a blanket and a pillow waited. Then, with the softest voice, he said, "You can sit. You can sleep. You can cry. You can be anything you need to be here. And you will not get in trouble ever again." Final scene. Later that night, Mr. Wallace peeked into the living room. Owen had fallen asleep on the couch, one hand still clutching the strap of his backpack. The superhero bedsheet was tangled at his feet, his breathing deep, his face finally at rest. Mr. Wallace exhaled a long breath. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of the heater and the ticking of a dusty wall clock, he realized something. He had not just opened his door to a broken child. He had opened it to healing. And maybe, just maybe, he had found his purpose too. As Mr. Wallace gently guided Owen inside his modest apartment, he could see the boy's confusion in the way he hesitated on the doorstep. Owen's eyes flickered with uncertainty, almost as if he were waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the first time in his life, he had been shown kindness. Yet still, his instincts screamed that it was too good to be true. "You're not going to be in trouble," Mr. Wallace said, his voice low and steady, the warmth of his hands steadying the boy. But as he led Owen into the quiet safety of his home, his heart tightened. He longed to promise the child a perfect life. But he knew too well that the road ahead would be long, jagged, and full of hurdles. The legalities of the case, Owen's trauma, the ongoing uncertainty, it was a heavy weight for any one person to carry. Still, in that moment, the promise of safety was all he could offer. The next morning, Mr. Wallace stood at the school gates, not as the janitor in the background, but as Owen's foster caretaker. The transition was stark, and Mr. Wallace noticed the shift in the way people looked at him, some with surprise, others with quiet acknowledgement. No grand gestures or announcements, just the silent recognition of what it meant to step forward when it mattered most. For Owen, it was like stepping into an alien world. His eyes darted nervously from face to face, his body stiff and uncertain. As he glanced at Mr. Wallace, it was almost as if he were waiting for a reprimand, a punishment, something familiar. But none came, only gentle reassurance. The complications quickly began to stack up. Mr. Wallace had to adjust his work schedule to make sure Owen had supervision before and after school. The principal, recognizing the dire situation, gave him flexibility, allowing him to arrive early to finish his janitorial duties so he could keep an eye on Owen. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Teachers who had once dismissed Owen as defiant or difficult began to change their tune. They noticed the boy's subtle shifts, his gaze lingering on others, his posture straightening a little more each day. They apologized for their harsh judgments. But in the background, the bureaucracy crawled at a sluggish pace. The system moved too slowly, and yet Mr. Wallace couldn't afford to lose faith in it, not now. But what mattered most was Owen's transformation in the small moments. Mr. Wallace had seen it. The first time Owen sat down in the cafeteria, his body rigid at first, as if he expected an unseen blow. But when no one came for him, when no one screamed or shoved him aside, the boy's shoulders relaxed, just slightly, but enough to make Mr. Wallace's chest tighten with something resembling joy. But healing wasn't linear. There were nights when Owen woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The shadows of abuse lingered. The fear of sudden movement, of the invisible hand that had once struck him, still gripped him tightly. Mr. Wallace had not expected miracles, and he wasn't about to start expecting them now. But he did his best to offer Owen a normal life, one where there was no punishment for a spilled glass of milk, where the scent of dinner cooking didn't bring on a wave of dread. Then came the day when Mr. Wallace saw the breakthrough, the quiet but monumental shift. After the final bell rang, he was just about to grab his janitorial cart and wipe down the art room when he saw Owen standing in the hallway. The boy was clutching something in his hands, a piece of paper, its edges crinkled, its surface colored with crayon scribbles. Owen hesitated. The paper wavered between them like an unspoken question. Mr. Wallace took it, his hands steady. The drawing was simple, nothing more than a rough sketch of a house, a sun, and a tree. But to Mr. Wallace, it was a testament of hope, a boy learning to trust again, a boy learning that it was safe to show his heart. Later that night, as Mr. Wallace tucked Owen into bed, the boy whispered, "Thank you." The words were small, tentative, but they were enough. Mr. Wallace sat down at the edge of the bed, his heart heavy with something more than gratitude. It was responsibility, a feeling that both terrified and empowered him. He wasn't just offering Owen a roof over his head. He was giving him something far more precious, the chance to heal. As he watched Owen drift off to sleep, the weight of it all sank in. It wasn't just the boy who had been saved. Mr. Wallace had saved a piece of himself too. The road ahead would still be difficult. Kurt's trial was looming, the foster system was fraught with red tape, and Owen's past would never be truly gone. But Mr. Wallace knew this. He had stepped into the breach when no one else would. And in doing so, he had given Owen the one thing that mattered most: a future. A future built on love, patience, and the quiet strength of a man who refused to look away. Owen's hand trembled as he extended the crumpled piece of paper. It was a drawing, a child's world on an 8x11 canvas. The stool, painted in calming shades of blue and green, lacked any harsh edges or nails, unlike the one he had once known. The stool in his drawing was no longer a weapon. It was just a stool. Beneath the image, Owen had scrawled words. "This is a safe stool. No hurting." Mr. Wallace blinked, feeling a lump form in his throat. The simplicity of it struck him like a punch to the gut. "Thank you for sharing this, buddy." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Do you want to tell me more about it?" Owen's gaze dropped, his shoulders tightening as if the weight of his memories was too much to bear. "If you have a stool, it shouldn't be for hurting. It should just be for sitting," he whispered. Mr. Wallace's heart ached. He placed a gentle hand on the boy's trembling shoulder. "I agree. I won't let anything like that happen to you again." Owen's eyes flickered, a tiny spark of trust flickering in their depths. It was fragile, this trust, but it was there. That trust was about to be tested. A few days later, news of Kurt's appeal shattered the fragile calm. The man who had hurt Owen was fighting to get him back. He claimed Owen was mentally unstable, that the boy had fabricated stories to tear him down. Mr. Wallace's stomach twisted into knots at the thought. The veneer of credibility Kurt had built up in front of certain officials was a dangerous weapon. What if they believed him? The thought of Owen being sent back to that hell was unbearable. But Diana, the caseworker, reassured him. The evidence was overwhelming, especially the video of the slap that had sent shockwaves through the system. And the scandal involving Kurt's brother-in-law threatened to unravel everything. Despite this, the gears of bureaucracy were unpredictable, grinding slowly as the case hung in limbo. Still, Mr. Wallace stood firm. His life had become a balancing act. By day, he cleaned the hallways of Highland Oaks. By night, he became Owen's caretaker, his protector. He hadn't signed up to be a father. No, he was just the one standing between this boy and further harm. Yet, something inside him began to shift. A deep, paternal protectiveness bloomed, unbidden, but undeniable. His new role was not without its challenges. He started looking for child-sized hoodies, ones that actually fit Owen's small frame. He made sure Owen had a lunch packed every morning, one that would fill his stomach but not feed the fear of tomorrow. He guided Owen into school each day, no longer as a janitor, but as his protector. The school staff, who had once regarded Owen with suspicion, watched in quiet awe as the transformation unfolded. One evening, after a quiet dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches, Owen spoke up. His voice was barely a whisper, but the words carried the weight of all the pain he had endured. "Kurt," he used the stool, "made me sit there for hours. He said if I moved, it'd be worse." The words hit Mr. Wallace like a physical blow. The rage bubbled up from deep inside him. Did he do that often? His voice was barely a rasp, thick with anger. Owen nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "He said it was for my own good." Mr. Wallace clenched his fists under the table, the sound of Owen's words ringing in his ears like a bell. How could anyone, any adult, do this to a child? The fury was almost too much to bear, but he swallowed it down. Owen needed him to stay strong. Behind the scenes, things began to move. The district office buzzed with activity. Kurt's brother-in-law was placed on administrative leave. Old cases, buried under years of neglect, were being reopened. The abuse Kurt had inflicted was no longer a hidden secret. It was coming to light. But none of this mattered as much as one thing. Owen had to be safe. Mr. Wallace was prepared to do whatever it took, even if it meant standing up in a hearing, speaking publicly about the injuries Owen had suffered. The thought of public speaking terrified him, but he would face it if it meant keeping Owen safe. Despite the looming battle, life at Highland Oaks continued. Mr. Wallace continued to scrub floors, unclog drains, and replace flickering light bulbs. Teachers went on with their lessons. But there was something new now, something different. Owen was no longer the invisible, troubled child in the background. He had a small anchor now. Mr. Wallace was his constant, his safe place. Miss Downing, one of Owen's teachers, confided in Mr. Wallace one day. He joined a reading group voluntarily. He actually sat at the table, she said, eyes wide with disbelief. That's huge. Mr. Wallace could barely hold back the pride that swelled in his chest. For Owen, sitting still, trusting again, it was a victory. A small one, but a victory nonetheless. As the days passed, the court case loomed larger. Kurt's defense became more desperate. He insisted that the slap was nothing more than a playful tap, that Owen had made up his entire story. But the evidence, the witnesses, the testimony, it was all adding up. The caseworker and juvenile advocate were determined to expose the truth. Still, Mr. Wallace worried. Owen's anxiety had only grown as the court date neared. The boy often asked if Kurt, would come back to take him away. Each time, Mr. Wallace did his best to reassure him, but it hurt to see the doubt in Owen's eyes. Could he truly protect him from this threat? The climactic moment arrived on a Wednesday, just after Mr. Wallace had finished cleaning up a major water spill in the lunchroom. He stepped into the main office, his heart racing, unsure of what to expect. Miss Carver, the vice principal, waved him over. Her face was a picture of relief. "They've closed the case," she said softly, as if afraid to speak too loudly. Kurt lost his appeal. "The charges are official. Owen's not going anywhere." Mr. Wallace closed his eyes, releasing a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The weight of months of worry lifted off his chest. He pictured Owen's anxious face, his nervous glances. The stool. And now, Owen was free to heal. Without that looming shadow. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Mr. Wallace found Owen in the hallway, sorting through his cubby. The boy's eyes were tired, but as soon as he saw Mr. Wallace's smile, his face softened. "They said I can stay," Owen whispered, his voice quivering with emotion. Mr. Wallace's throat tightened, but he nodded, fighting the lump that had formed. "That's right. And hey, if you feel like sitting on the couch tonight, you can stay there for as long as you want." For the first time in a long while, Owen smiled, a shaky, hesitant smile. But it was a smile. That evening, as Mr. Wallace locked up the school and guided Owen out the front doors, he felt the weight of months of fear and uncertainty finally slip away. The hallway lights dimmed behind them, the glass doors reflecting their silhouettes. Mr. Wallace, the quiet janitor, and Owen, the boy who had learned to trust, to sit, to rest. As they walked together, side by side, a strange but unbreakable bond between them, Owen paused. He turned to Mr. Wallace with a soft question. "Can we watch a movie tonight?" he asked. "I'll sit on the couch." Mr. Wallace's voice cracked, thick with emotion. "Yeah, buddy. We absolutely can. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more.